You are not diseased. You are not powerless. You don't need to do a moral inventory, that there's nothing wrong with you. You just have an addiction. And if you can get the addiction over with, you don't have a psychic change or a spiritual experience. You just have an addiction. You are not carried the defects. You are not an alcoholic. You are not this mentally defective, in full flight from reality. Like, none of these things are true. Don't ever take anything anyone tells you as fact.
Hello and welcome to the Sobriety Bestie podcast. I am super excited you're here today for a great long-awaited episode with the one, the only Quackaholics Anonymous. Yay! I'm so happy to be here with you today. Thank you for joining me.
Got like 11,000 subscribers, so I kind of feel a little intimidated. I'm used to a smaller audience.
You are legendary for sure in the deprogramming from AA space. You're an OG. You've been here from the gate. You have been very brave and just put yourself out there and just spoke your truth. So I really admire your courage and your willingness to be honest. I'm like, quite frankly, especially after leaving AA, allergic to bullshit, and it's refreshing to listen to you.
Yeah, I think, I don't know if it was so much coverage as it was that I was just so infuriated. It was one of those things like these cartoon characters that you see just turning beet red before they explode. It was more like that. It was like, I'm just going to grab a camera and start talking. But part of what got me going was that I would see little titles online, why AA is bad for you, or AA could be a cult. And I would click on the videos and they'd always say, now, first of all, I have nothing against AA. It's a wonderful organization. It saved all these people. And I was like, I just said, you know what? I'm just going to start recording and I'm going to say, no, it's not, and it kind of got started from there. And I say here lately at the beginning of every video, my early videos, are cringeworthy because I didn't have a format. I didn't have a plan. I didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I was upset and I was just going to rave and I was going to rant. And then over time, I couldn't really pinpoint an exact time, but it was like I started thinking, it's kind of like that book, 1984. There's parts in the book where they're talking about the language of newspeak taking over. And the whole intent was like, if you're a member of the party living in an Oceania in this dystopian nightmare, and you saw injustice or you saw things that were not, that weren't connecting, you wouldn't even have the vocabulary to express why you thought it was wrong. And I think that's what made me start talking more about logical fallacies and things like that on here, was because I would hear these idiotic statements, that these people would make on my channel. And I knew what they were saying was nonsense, but I didn't know how to come at it in a way to frame it where it's like, no, this is what you're doing here. You're poisoning the well. You're committing a straw man. You're doing this, I did a deep dive on a lot of logical fallacies.
Yeah. Yeah, the true Scotsman, the real alcoholic.
And they're always saying, only you can decide if you're a real alcoholic. Well, you're probably not a real alcoholic. Well, wait a minute. And it was just one contradiction right after the other. Like, the idea of, well, now you've got a disease. It's not your fault. We're not bad people trying to get good. We're sick people trying to get well. But then sobriety is your responsibility. And if you drink again, it's your fault and you failed the program. I was like, well, now, wait a minute. I'm powerless and it's not my fault, but I'm a bad person when I pick up. But I didn't really have the wording to really comment on the channel about, this is what they're doing. This is why it's not logically possible. This is why this is nonsense. So that was when I started kind of leaning more heavily into that. I had a better idea about what I wanted to talk about, rather than just reading a line and just yelling, see, this is just bullshit, like I did in my early videos. I just, see, that's what he said here. This is just bullshit. That was all I could do. I didn't have the sufficient vocabulary, I guess is the word,
Totally. And that does a couple of things for me. Number one, I feel like that's very inspiring for the people right now who feel like they don't know what to do. Maybe they're not familiar with making content or whatever, but they actually want to really talk about deprogramming or deconstructing AA because they also have that face that got really red and they're at that boiling point where they want to just tell their truth. So it's really inspiring that that's your journey, because it's almost like gives permission for other people to be like, just start exactly where you're at, hit record and just go, just let it go. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then the other thing is, I like that you kept going and you've learned as you go. I know from me, like I started dissenting about almost 6 months ago online. I left AA 5.5 years ago, but I've grown so much in these past 6 months of deprogramming out loud on the internet. Like the first 90 days, I did a podcast every day. So I did 90 and 90, right? So I've done a lot. And so, but it's grown me so much. So I imagine that you've grown tremendously by actually speaking about it all. I think it's such a great way to deprogram, to do it out loud.
Yeah, like when I first left, and I left under a really black cloud. I mean, there was a nasty legal battle with the with this. You've heard me reference him on there many times. This piece of shit sponsor I was living with, and I was borderline homeless, you know, and I was couch surfing. I was pretty much at the bottom, and I was pretty much convinced this is it for me. I'm going to drink myself to death, or I'm going to get little dry spells like I've been doing for the past 11 years, and then I'm going to go back to the bottle. This is the end for me, you know. And there at first was this huge void when I was trying. I said, well, I'm going to just try to stop. I mean, I've got to try to stop. You know, they put me on Librium because I was having such violent alcoholic withdrawals that, you know, a lot of people don't realize that if you're alcohol dependent like I was, you can actually seize up and die. If you know, it's not like in the movies when they just pour the liquor down the drain and the person just, you know, puffs up. It's like, okay, that's it, no more drinking. It's really a lot more of a nightmare type situation. Real DTs, I've been through them and all of that. And I said, I'm just going to try to stop drinking. You know, and when my Librium prescription ran out and I knew that I wasn't going to go into a seizure, I was just so empty. Because I was like, well, I don't know what to do with myself anymore. You know, the last 11 years of my life has been wrapped up in this organization. I've been branded a chronic relapser. I had people tell me, I hope you do die, because then it'll be a testimony to everybody else to show what happens when people who think they're too smart for this program do like you did. You're a lesson, you know. And like I said, there was just this empty void. And it was like, what do I do with my life now? I mean, I was trying to get some semblance of real employment, because all I was doing at that time was these little temp jobs, you know, a little construction here or something there to get a little cash going. But I was just really at the bottom, and I was fortunate enough to be living in someone's bedroom, and I had access to the internet. And it occurred to me, I was always a big fan of movies, and I was always a big fan of, you know, books and literature and that kind of thing. And it hit me, I haven't really sat down and really enjoyed a book or a TV show for 11 years. I mean, every time I would crack open any work of fiction or I would see something on the television, I would try to translate it back into AA speak, you know, in my mind. Like, I remember when that really gritty Western came out on HBO back in the day. It was called Deadwood, where they turned cussing into an entire eloquent poetry with some of the most vile language. But at the end of the episodes back then, I would say, you know, that's an awful lot like what they're talking about in AA. I mean, his ego is getting in the way. I was viewing pop culture through this religious lens, and I had never had an opportunity to actually like enjoy anything without it translating back to AA. Like if I went for a walk and I was feeling peaceful, there was a part of my mind that's like, yeah, and this wouldn't be possible if it wasn't for AA. You know, just like the big book says, everything translated back to AA. And it always kills me when I get these comments from these people. Oh, you really never wanted to be in the program. You never worked the staff. You probably never had a sponsor. I was like, I dove, you know, deep into this stuff. I was reading that book like my life depended on it. I was one of those people that you see that have yellow highlights all through the book and pink highlights all through the book, you know. And even when I would get called on as a chronic relapser, I'd be sitting there with the book. Well, now it says right here, it says, you know, this part right here, it says be rid of this selfishness if it kills us. It doesn't say get rid of, it says be rid of. And it's very cringeworthy now looking back on it. But I took this thing very, very seriously. I took it so seriously that when I realized it was all bullshit, you know, and that I'd basically been lied to, it was, it was just an upside down kind of thing. So like my new beginning leaving was literally enjoy a movie without an AA lens, you know, read a book without an AA lens. I mean, which was kind of hard to do, but I remember one of my very first evenings when it was peaceful, I was sitting in front of a computer and I was watching this movie on Netflix and I wasn't thinking about anything. And I was like, wow, This is, it's like 1984. The telescreen has been turned off. There's nobody patrolling my brain. And
Totally.
that's kind of where I just started. But I was just so full of anger around that time of everything I had saw and everything I went through. I think the last 4 years of being in it is when, well, let's see. I'm trying to think. When I got court ordered in, I had been in AA for 5 years. So I'm going to say the last, or maybe 6 years. I'm going to say last 4 or 5 years is when I really began to see what it was really like. Because when I got court ordered in through drug court, there were people who I thought were friends of mine, and they'd look at me and they'd say, "You're just here to get a sheet signed. Sit back there in the back," and all that. Was like, you get to see people at their true colors. I could fill a book with everything that I went through when I was living in that guy's garage who was my sponsor, but he hung out with all these old timers. And I got to really see what these people are like when they're not in those meetings. I mean, I got to really see what they really like. I got to see the most low down things they do to people and the way they laugh at people's pain and suffering. And I got to really see them truly as they really were. I remember one eye-opening moment. There was a Thanksgiving where he had his two oldest children. He kind of pretended they didn't exist. For a long time when I was living with him, I didn't even know he had two older children because he liked to come to meetings. My two youngest daughters, were so proud of their father today. So I didn't even know he had two older children, but he had them there at his house, and there's all this food, and they were like, "You can come out of that garage and sit in here," which I kind of, you don't want to sit in the middle of someone else's family gathering. And he looks at his two oldest daughters and he says, "Well, I made my amends, didn't I? I truly made my amends." And they were like, "Actually, you haven't done anything for us." He literally turned the entire table over, like food went out in the floor everywhere, and he just started screaming, "Fuck you, get the fuck out of my house," and all that shit. And then that night at the meeting, he was sitting there, "And today, it's not about me today, today." And I was just sitting there like, "Oh my fucking God, I'm going to," And I would see that all the time among these people. They were buying food stamps from people who were drug addicts and hung near meetings. They were just doing all kinds of horrible things. And then I would have to sit there and listen to them talk about how spiritual they were. The one thing that really haunted me for a long time, because when you're living in somebody's garage, you can't really talk back to them on the level you want to. And he was always telling me, "You think you're really smart, but see, because of Google, I'm way smarter than you can ever hope to be." And he was always like, "Do you know about this historical fact?" And if I said, "No, don't know about that," he said, "Well, that's because I'm so much smarter than you." Now I see he was just a massively insecure, bullying man-child. But at that time, it was just a nightmare those last 4 or 5 years. Towards the end, he loved calling the police on people. He would pick fist fights with people, and he'd call the police on them. And at the time, I was intoxicated, and I went to jail. And while I was in jail, he just cleaned all my stuff out of my room. When I got out of jail, I was homeless. And it was like from there is when I started really building back up. And after having lived through all of that, because I was with him for 4 years, after living through 4 years of just nightmares, I was just so angry. I can't convey how angry I was. There were people that I still had contact with. I eventually got rid of all of them, but they were all about, "Well, anger is hurting you. The anger is hurting you." And I'm like, "No, you're not." And well, anger's going to make you drink yourself to death, And I finally just blocked everybody in the program. I mean, I blocked every single person on my Facebook profile. I wanted nothing to do with them. I didn't want to talk to them. And I don't exactly know what we're talking about any longer, but this is where I am now. And like you said, there's been so many changes since all this took place. I did a video about this, but there was a point, my first real kind of legitimate type job was at a supermarket, and I have to hit caffeine. But I was at this supermarket. I had DUIs in my background. I had arrest for public intoxication. The last thing with the landlord, he tried to get me for assault, even though he shoved me first, but it was pled down to public intoxication. And the supermarket was kind of looking at my application, and there were, at the time where I'm living in the state, when you have a DUI offense, you get an ID, but it's stamped in big red letters across the driver's license, DUI offender. So there were so many jobs I would go to, and I'm hitting it off with the interviewer, and and I'm thinking, I probably got a job here. I need a copy of your driver's license, and I'd hand that to him, and he'd look at it, he'd be like, oh, we'll call you, and I'm at this supermarket, and they're like, well, you've disclosed your background, because you never know if they're going to find it or not. I'm not going to lie on my background check and risk them finding it anyway, so I just came clean, and they're like, we're really not confident about giving you a chance, but we're going to give you a chance. And I knew if I could get a job somewhere, I've always really, really been a hard worker. And I knew if I got in there and I just, really dove in, that I'd be okay. But at first there was all these rumors surrounding me. I don't know who said it in the supermarket, but the young kids that worked there were like, stay away from that guy. That guy's a violent criminal. But over a period of time, that kind of died down. And I remember one of the very first moments where I realized I was starting to deprogram really good from AA was that I was getting off work and I didn't have a driver's license, and I was walking to catch a bus, and there were all these teenagers who worked at the store, and every Friday there was a park across the street, and they would throw their own little tailgate type party thing, and they all were pouring all this alcohol. They yelled and waved at me like that, and they were like, come on over here, have a drink with us. And I was like, I got to catch my bus. But it was a big moment for me, because I realized at that point, nobody's looking at me like a chronic relapser anymore. Nobody's looking at me like the way everybody looked at me in AA meetings. Nobody's saying Victor the alcoholic. They're just seeing me as another coworker here. And it was like, I've rejoined the world. I'm just an ordinary citizen trying. And that was such a huge victory for me. All these people around me, they're not judging me from how many relapses I've had. They're not judging me for what happened in my background. They're just seeing me as another person. That was a huge victory for me as far as deprogramming. It's really funny, after all the nightmare stuff I went through, there was still this giant void when I left AA. It was like, what am I going to do with my life now? I actually remembered looking around and saying, is there any organization where I can go there every night? And I was like, now, all this time later, I'm like, why would I want to go somewhere every night? I want to go home and watch TV and watch just a little bit of news. I mean, I can't tolerate too much news these days, because every day it's like, oh my God, this is happening. But that's kind of broken. I think I saw people who have commented on my channel, and they're like, I feel empty now that I've left. I try to tell them, hey, this is normal. You're going to feel empty for a little while. It's an addiction, really. It's an addiction, like an addiction to booze. And then they're like, well, I kind of have gone back, and there's a part of me that's like, I did that during my 11-year stint in there. I would leave for a couple of months, and I'd come back, and because I've been away a couple of months, the meetings feel new and fresh. And you see a few people that are nice and friendly, and you think, well, maybe it's not so bad after all. Maybe I'll give it another chance. And then the next thing you know, 6 months has passed, and you're neck deep in all the psychotic drama again. But that's pretty much the way the deprogramming went for me. But like you said, I've gone through so many changes since I first started this channel. I've changed so much as a person. I've changed so much as the way I view the world. I've had so many different positions and ideas about life. And in 11 years in AA, I don't think I ever was allowed to evolve and change on anything. Everything correlated back to AA. Everything correlated back to the big book. Everything correlated back to, you're always going to be a drunk. You're always going to be sick. You're always going to be this, So that's kind of the deprogramming angle for me.
Totally. Wow, what a story. I love your tenacity. And I was really moved by that moment where they invited you over for a drink, your coworkers, and it sounded like you felt like you joined life again, not like out of a cult, and you were just a part of society where people can be kind to strangers, and it's not this dogmatic programming thing. Did I hear it right that the reason why you left is because you were so angry, or was there something else? Like, for me, it was like a Santa Claus moment. I suddenly had an epiphany where I realized the whole thing was bullshit. And then I was just, I'm done. There's no way to go back. A lot of people, it's more gradual though, and they're understanding that AA isn't real, or they're wanting to leave AA. What was the process of actually deciding to leave?
The guy I was living with, when he had me arrested, him and his cronies pretty much controlled the home group where I went. and I wasn't really liked in any of the groups any longer. People would get up and move when I walked in, and I was like, after what has happened, I'm just not going to walk back in there again. I'm not going to walk back in there with these assholes. And so there was a part of me that's like, I've gotten out of jail. He'll be looking for any excuse right now to file a new charge on me. And I just said, I'm not going back in there. So it wasn't even really a conscious decision on my part. I was long burned out with it. It's kind of strange looking back on it now. It's like, why didn't you just step away sooner? And it's like, when you're just knee deep in it, you kind of lose sight of the fact that, hey, there's other things to do in life. But
yeah, we get trapped.
I was going to fight the initial charges against me, and in fact, this is another thing that's interesting. There was a really popular guy in the meetings for a while, and he was another one that was telling me, "You're just going to probably have to die. I mean, it's unfortunate, but you're just probably going to have to die." But his favorite thing was to say is, "It is what it is," and he had some kind of legal thing, and the guy that I was living with and all his little cronies went down there in court and pretty much lied on his behalf and got him off. And I don't know what the case was. I know it had something to do with domestic violence. And then a few months later, he was arrested again, and he had violently assaulted a little child and broke their bones, broke their arms and everything. And at the time that happened, of course, all these AA old timers were like, well, now I didn't say anything in court. I wasn't dishonest in court and all that and I knew at that point it would be useless to fight the charges against me, because I said, they'll just go down there like they did in this case, and they'll just lie, and they'll just make up whatever they want to make up. So I'm not even going to try to beat it. It was just lucky the public defender pleaded it down to a public intoxication charge when I was leaving, because the original charge was assault with intent to harm. That's a record killer right there on any kind of job application. But yeah, he actually did end up back in prison after doing that. He had even gotten on television with the local news media at one point. This guy had, I've turned my life around, and it's all because he had this new restaurant thing he was opening up, and then like literally 2 months later, he's on the front page of the paper. He had beat up his girlfriend, and then he beat up her child really badly, even though she had locked herself in the bathroom and everything. They said the kid had broken bones, and we're talking like a 4-year-old. I mean, it was just so infuriating just to hear about this. But I got to see that side of AA, so I just had so much hate.
Yeah.
But that's kind of how I got out. I didn't really make a decision. I was just really, I was living more in a reactive state at that time. It was, well, I'll dry out for a couple of months and I'll try to make it. And then, back to benders and back to 2 months of waking up in the morning, drinking vodka at 2 a.m. because I'm shaking real badly and everything. I don't know if it's just a resignation, because, I think that was there too. It's like, well, look, I've lost my license. I've got a criminal record. There's not going to be any real future for me whatsoever, and I look at my life now and it's like, wow, it's that happened to someone else in a movie. There was a good friend of mine who was, I don't know if he ever left or not, but I remember the reason I brought this up is the way to talk about how you get trapped in it. He would stand outside, he'd say, I'm really tired of hearing this shit. And then he'd say, I really don't even want to hear it anymore. And then he'd say, and then one of these people, one of the hot shots said, well, you never know, tonight might be the night that saves your life. And he screamed at him. He said, I've been coming here for 16 years. And then he said, 16 years, and he had told me, he said, see, I stopped picking up the white chips. When I get a year, I'll pick up a medallion. And I said, so when you get a year, you'll get a medallion. He said, let's face it, I'll be drunk between now and then anyway. So it's like it just becomes something you do, even when you don't believe in it any longer. It's just a thing you keep doing, But he was a relapser like me, and he came back after a really bad bender one time, and he was like, okay, I got to get it this time. Seriously, I almost died that last time. I've got to get this. And then about 2 weeks later, the meeting was starting, and I said, are we going to go inside? We were standing outside. And he said, I don't know. I'm getting sick of this shit. Just that little 3-week period is like, okay, there's really no answers here, but,
Yeah. I'm not sure if you chose abstinence or harm reduction or whatever, but what helped you after you left AA, what helped you with your alcohol problem?
I mean, I was on antidepressants for a little while, and I got lucky. Like, there's a lot of times on my channel when people will say something like, "You're sticking up for the psychiatric community and they're frauds and all that." I'm like, I'm not sticking up for the psychiatric community, but I did manage to get through some community center one of these. And believe it or not, he was an intern. He wasn't actually a professional, but he got to talking to me about OCD, and I said, I told him how severely I suffered with OCD most of my life, and I started diving into the research on that. And I said, I'm beginning to wonder if this entire addiction thing is being fueled by OCD, because I had it almost crippling when I was a teenager. As a matter of fact, sometimes people around me thought I was joking, because I would have to go check something over and over and over and over and over, or I would have to wash my hands over and over and over and over. Or as a matter of fact, I remember an interview with the punk rock band from the 70s, the Ramones. They said Joey Ramone had that really badly, and they didn't know about it in my day too much, but they said he would have to run up the apartment and check the doors, and they would literally lose their temper at him and literally get into a knockdown, drag out, almost fight with him, because they said, "You're just making us late on purpose." And really, there was a really interesting book I picked up called Brain Lock. And when I was reading that book, I was like, wow, this is me. Wow, this is me. And I began to realize that if there is not this spiritual disease, there's got to be something that's causing me to just lose it, because literally I start drinking and I just spiral with it. And the more I got to thinking or researching on the OCD angle, I started approaching it from that angle. But one of the interesting things I noticed was that after a period of time, when you're not believing you're powerless, when you kind of believe that you're the one doing it, I kind of came to this idea, it's been me who's been making these decisions all along. And that's kind of where I started kind of realizing that if it is that there never was no higher power keeping me away from those little dry stints I would get, because, everybody would say, well, don't you believe in God yet? You haven't drank in 2 weeks. Don't you know that's God? And I realized now there was no such thing. Go do it. It was me doing it. That improved it a lot, because when you bat the responsibility of it back into the person's court and they realize, hey, this is me who's doing this anyway. It's me who wants to quit drinking. It's me who wants to not do these things. Then you're it's empowering, and you're not necessarily in this helpless state of, what am I going to do if I get a craving again? I won't be able to stop it, because that's kind of what AA programmed me to believe, so that would be that.
I love it. I agree with you 100%, to take the responsibility for your life and to look at it as, no, I do have the power. No, it is me. And what do I decide? And what do I want for myself? And I think that's one of the most harmful aspects of AA, is the learned helplessness, is that you have a fatal progressive disease. There's nothing you could do. You have to rely on something outside of yourself. And so I really love that you left and you realized that you're powerful, which you probably knew before you ever got to AA. So yeah, that sounds like a really huge deprogramming unlock. I love that. When did you realize that AA was a scam?
Probably in the last 2 or 3 years before I left AA. I found that website, the Orange Papers,
Okay.
and but it still. I went through this really strange process where I was like, okay, some of the book is not true, but the core message is true, or I would go through some of that stuff doesn't apply to me today, but the message at its core, there's a kernel of truth here. The Orange Papers is right about a lot of things, but there still must be something to this, so that was kind of a gradual thing, I guess. I came originally from an extremely religious background growing up. It was a Catholic background. And there is some truth to the idea that Catholics don't read their Bible. That's just actually kind of true. But I actually did. And I know that I worried those priests to death as a kid, because I took everything in there seriously, like AA. And I was always going to priests. And I was like, look, right here, I don't understand this and all this other kind of thing. So when I got to AA, I was in an in-between place where it's like, I don't know if I believe this or not any longer. And then, of course, you go to AA and you hear about all these spiritual experiences. And then I had this whole, well, what if God wants me to be here, kind of moment. And And so the deprogramming for me was also kind of rooted in this idea of that there is this religious force that's literally punishing me for the person I am. I mean, people would tell me all the time, "You're being punished for your intellectual pride," and it somewhere along the way it was like, wait a minute, there's something up there that's looking at me and saying he's just too proud. I'm just gonna, oh, uh, I did stumble across, and I don't mention it very often on my channel because I realize you have people from all kinds of different faiths, but I stumbled across this guy named Matt Dillahunty who does call-in shows, an atheist call-in show, and I just kept listening to debate after debate after debate after debate. I kept thinking every one of these ideas I have about being punished, they're all based in the same logical fallacies that he keeps pointing out to these people over and over. But I kept listening to debate after debate after debate to where one thing he said that was really key is he said, if you believe in something, and you say, okay, I'm convinced this is real, do I have good evidence to think this is real? And that kind of sent me on this really bizarre spiral because I was like, well, there was a whole bunch of things that I would think, well, I believe this is true, but then I kept thinking, what good reasons do I have to believe this is true? And I would keep examining, and I realized that a lot of these things that I kept believing about AA was simply because AA told me they were true. I didn't have sufficient reason to say, wait a minute, because Bill W. says this is just the way it is, I mean.
It's like there's content prior to investigation, right? But then there's also belief prior to investigation, which is like the indoctrination.
That's real true. I don't know how it works for a lot of different people, but I think if you're kind of susceptible to this, plus, in those days, no YouTube back then. I mean, there was no social media. There was a few internet message boards. You might find an article here and there that said something about AA, but of course the articles would always start out the same way. I have nothing against AA. AA saved millions of people, and and it was like, I want some criticism.
I can't even with that stuff. I can't. Just tell me the truth. That's why I'm so glad that Charlie Sheen just wrote a book all about how AA is like a robotic cult. I was like, thank you for being honest. The first time I've heard an A-list actor, I'm like, I can't with the, oh, I don't apologizing. Just tell me the truth. Actually, he was a little apologetic on the Joe Rogan show. Like, I don't want to say anything bad about AA, but his book, he didn't do any of that. I just wish more people were honest. Like, so many of us get trapped in the cult for so long, and that wouldn't be the case if there were more people that were just honest about their experience. It doesn't mean believe anybody. I do think belief without investigation is just like content without investigation. We should investigate, especially when it comes to something as important as our mental health, our well-being, alcohol addiction, any of that. I mean, this is our whole life, our will and our life being turned over to this cult.
Made a decision to turn our will and lives over. Is like, well, how many times in my life do I make decisions like that without a lot of investigation first? I mean, if I walked into a board meeting or an office setting and they said, you got to make a decision, turn your will and your life over to us, I'd be like, whoa, 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 whoa. I need to know what I'm getting into here. Yeah, here, you're just kind of told, you've got to make this decision, which is weird because they say you're an alcoholic when you decide you're an alcoholic. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm an alcoholic when I decide I'm an alcoholic, but I got to make a decision to turn my will and my life over to, okay, this isn't working. The other thing is if something is true, like if I'm truly allergic to penicillin, like I really am allergic to penicillin. If I take it, I break out, high fever, all that stuff. That doesn't happen whether I admit that I'm allergic to penicillin. Is, and it's the same thing with this whole, well, you're an alcoholic when you decide you are. Well, wait a minute. I didn't realize my decisions alter truth. I mean, if something's true, it's true. I mean,
Right.
You breathe oxygen when you decide to breathe oxygen. No, I don't think it works like that. If it's a truth, then it's just true.
You have a disease that wants you dead, and if you don't agree to that, that's evidence of your disease.
Exactly. I call it AA tap dance, and they just have an excuse made for everything. If you went to a meeting and said, well, I don't really feel like I'm an alcoholic. I'm a 6-pack of beer a week guy, and I just don't really feel like it. I like the meeting, but they would just say you're in denial. Or if you came to a meeting and you said, well, I'm not I'm hesitant about these steps. They wouldn't say, well, now you're an alcoholic when you decide you're an alcoholic. Maybe you're not an alcoholic. They wouldn't do that. They'd say, no, you're just in denial, or if you said, well, I don't relate to these people. Well, yet you haven't had it, and all of that. So they'll tell you it's up to you to decide, but then they'll turn right around and they make the decision for you.
Totally. I had some horrific yets projected onto me. Well, you just haven't done these things yet. I'm like, bro, I'm never going to do some of the stuff you're talking about. What do you mean yet? As if everything's on the table that I'm going to possibly do all the things.
It's cringeworthy now, but that was one of my lines, towards the end. I would always say, well, I don't have any more yet. I don't have any more yet. The next stop is death, and it turns out the next stop wasn't death. The next stop was a life outside of this horrible, heinous, insidious organization. But
so you left AA, you had already read the orange pages, you were fed up with your toxic sponsor, you were done. The whole thing was just way too culty, and it sounds demoralizing, dehumanizing. Like the way that they were treating you breaks my heart. And yeah, I'm just really sorry that you experienced that. It makes me a little emotional to think about like how hard that was for you at the end. I'm glad that you left though. I'm glad you escaped and that was part of your motivation. Like that, like I don't want to gloss over that, right? But like thank God you left. And what point after leaving did you decide, fuck it, I'm gonna let it rip on the internet, YouTube publish?
Trying to think about the time period in between. I couldn't define an exact moment. I just knew that there's like this part of us, when you believe something that doesn't look like nobody else does, you just start searching on the internet, trying to find something. Like, surely outside of this one orange papers guy, there's got to be other people out here, and like I said, on YouTube, every time I would click a video, it was the same thing that we just talked about. Whoa, now Alcoholics Anonymous has saved millions of people. There's no denying that. I'm like, yes, there is denying that. God damn it. And I just finally was like, I'm just going to talk. Somebody, and in fact, I remember dying laughing over Orange Papers had a section there. It was called But It Saved Millions. And it was all these letters from all these people. I read it in a kind of a cartoon character voice, but someone had sent him a letter and said, how dare you talk bad about this organization that saved millions of people? And his response was, first of all, let's get our facts straight. And he typed in block letters. He said, AA never saved millions of people. And that's another thing. I had no evidence that it saved millions of people. I was in it for years. And generally speaking, every home group, every meeting is a few people that run the thing. The constant influx of treatment center people, the people like myself that just keep going and failing. If it was such a wonderful thing, it would just be overpacked. You wouldn't be able to hold a stadium with all the people. And I noticed that in all the meetings I went to, the same people were the 20-year people. I was like, well, if it saved millions of people, you'd have in every meeting, I've been sober 5 years, 10 years, 11 years. You generally had people that had a few months like myself, and you had the 20-year people that pretty much controlled the way the thing runs. So I was like, well, I don't really have any evidence of these millions of people. Where are they coming from? Then later on found out that there never was millions of people to save. It's always had about 2 to 3 million members all this time, And like the big eye-opening thing that hit me was finding out that, because I really believed the party line. I believed that Bill and Bob sat down together and cooked this thing up and it just spread worldwide. And then I found out about Marty Mann and I was like, this whole thing is just one big gigantic multi-million-dollar pyramid scheme, I mean, that's all it is. But so I couldn't really define when I said I'm going to just start talking. I just got a camera and started talking, and I had a terrible camera. And, at the time where I was living, my landlord, because I finally was able to get a place, my landlord would come in with all this stuff from storage, and he'd be like, hey, I got to leave this here for a few days till we figure out where to put it. So when I look at my early videos, I've got all these stuffed animals and toys and all this stuff stacked behind me everywhere. I probably look like some crazy dude in some basement somewhere just shouting into a microphone. I mean, it's really cringeworthy. I even thought about deleting them, but I've had so many people say, don't delete those early videos because I love them still. So I'll leave them up. I remember what that would look like because, he would come in again. Oh, we got to leave these things here. And I'd have the laptop over here like that with the camera over here like that. Behind me, there's like somebody once commented and said, I can't listen to you. There's too much shit piled up in your living room. I realized that the phone actually makes a better recording, and then I put it in a room where there's nothing behind me because, stuff can be a distraction.
Yeah. Yeah. And ultimately, it doesn't matter. I mean, people will say all sorts of reasons why they can't listen to me. I don't like your voice. I don't like your attitude. I don't like your hair. I don't like your what. I'm like, I don't care. Like, like, go find somebody. Like, honestly, like,
It's a convenient way to not address the topic at hand, is what I always think it is. Like, I've had people say, you're hideously ugly. Well, what does that have to do with what I'm saying?
totally. I've had so many different, all across the board, like from like mildly mean to like totally like really hardcore, like bad. And it's just like literally, it has nothing to do with what I'm saying. And it just shows me that if you need to make it personal instead of about what I'm saying, it's because what I'm saying has offended you and you can't intellectually have a conversation with me and think critically. So you got to blame it on me. And whether I'm or not, I'm all these things that you're saying are irrelevant to the fact that Alcoholics Anonymous causes harm.
Like I said before in videos, if someone just leaves a nasty comment, I go ahead and publish them. When I first started doing this, some of the people in AA who had said, you're going to die, or you're going to die, I would send them my videos and they would block me, but then they would leave personal information on the channel. So I just started approving comments. And if someone leaves an ugly comment, I go ahead and approve it. But when they spam, like when I look in my comment section and it's just insult, 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 and then they're attacking people on my channel, I just go ahead and get rid of them. I mean, they may come out in full force when this hits this channel, but I've had some that are like, one of the funniest ones that I had, because it was the same account. And he said, this is nothing more than just a left-wing Jew spreading nonsense. And then beneath it, he said, you look just like Adolf Hitler. I'm like, I look like Adolf Hitler, but I'm a left-wing Jew. So, I almost published those just to show how stupid that was. But either that's a sock puppet that's just spewing shit,
Totally. Totally. Wow. Yeah. So how has dissenting been for you? I mean, how has it been to share your thoughts about leaving a cult on the internet?
Really encouraging when I hear other people chime in. That's one of the things that kept me going. I think if in the early days it had been nothing but a litany. Well, no, actually, I'm going to have to walk that back. If it had been a litany of AA people insulting me, that would have made me double down and go stronger. There have been times in my life when I've got a lot of things going on, maybe I should step away from this. And then I see comments about, you just don't know how much these videos help me. And then I think about another topic. I'm like, actually, that would be something interesting to talk about, because I read incessantly about things in my spare time, and I'll hear something from history, I'll hear something in philosophy, and I'll think to myself, actually, I was a victim of this kind of type thing. And it almost becomes secondary to me, because a lot of people have this idea that logic and philosophy and all those things, they're all these big words that are only meant for really, really, really smart people. And there's a part of me that's passionate about letting people know it's not hard, okay? It's not that hard at all. It's really simple stuff. And I can break it down and make it simple. And part of that problem is because of the philosophers themselves. I remember I had a guy come onto my channel one time and he said, what's your epistemic justification for this type of normative narrative? And I said, I don't know what that means. You tell me what that means. And he was like, and he kind of typed this, LOL, you don't even know what it means. And I was like, no, I don't know what it means. You tell me what it means. And then he came back at me with more word salad. And then I come back at him again. I was like, look, I don't even know how to argue with you, because I don't even know what the fuck you're talking about. And he declared victory and he left. And I was like, so I win because I'm confusing the wording. And especially in today's world now with YouTube and all that kind of stuff, it's way more easier to learn it. It took a long time for me to connect the dots, because when I was living in that guy's garage, in between doing these odds and end jobs, there was a huge public library close to me. And I just started grabbing books off shelves along with a dictionary and a pen and paper, and I'd sit there and read those books, and I would think, well, this doesn't make sense, or this doesn't make sense. And then slowly but surely it started to click, but I didn't get the actual way it all connects because I was getting it from odds and ends sources. I don't remember who it was who said it, but he said, I didn't go to college, so I got this, and I got this, and this, and this, but I didn't get this. And somewhere along the way, I kind of got that. I was like, this is how it all connects from Plato to now. And this is where these guys had these ideas that differed with these ideas, and it all made sense. And for me, that was really important because I learned it on my own. So anytime you hit a eureka moment on your own, it's like, wow, that changed my life completely. And whenever it changes my life completely, I'm like, I'm going to talk about this the next time I make a video, because I think it would be helpful for other people. And that's another thing that's kept me going. I had a comment not too long ago where the person said, I love it when you talk about logical fallacies, because it helps me so much when I hear these things. In fact, one writer, his name is Daniel Dennett. He's passed on now, but he had a phrase that I latched onto immediately when I heard it, but he called it deepity. Deepity is when you say something like they do in AA, like when they say it's a spiritual axiom that when we're disturbed, something's wrong with us. Well, a deepity means it sounds really deep and profound, but if you examine it, it doesn't mean anything. Offender. Well, that sounds really convincing, but if you start kind of probing that, okay, how do you know it's the number one offender? Where did you reach this conclusion from? Did you just make this up? And you realize it's not deep at all. But I would hear so many people sit in meetings and say these idiotic things, but they're deepities. There was one guy that his favorite thing was, it's not all about me today, but it is all about me. That is a mystery of this program that no one can solve. And I'm like, no, it's not really a mystery, asshole. It's all about you in here. I mean, you're on your little high horse in here.
I mean, that is such a great word. I think they should change the program name to Deepity Anonymous.
Right. In fact, one of my, and he had, I never knew why he came. I guess because he was just too deep into it. He was one of my favorite people in all the years in there. He was an older guy. He was cantankerous. He had a stroke, so that might have been responsible for what he would do. But he would sit in a meeting, and when these people were talking and they were doing their thing like that, he'd say, oh, here we go. It's just a bunch of blah, blah, blah. It would just kill me every time. But he was chairing a meeting one time, and he was in a good mood, which was really rare. And he said, would anybody like to speak? And this guy said, my name is James. I am an alcoholic. Like that. He said, oh, shit, here we go. It's just going to be a bunch of... Because I was thinking that's what it really is. It's just a lot of self-important talk. There's a lot of it. But yeah, Deepity Anonymous, I think that'd be a good name for it.
What has your relationship with alcohol been like since you left Alcoholics Anonymous? Also, I have no idea how long ago you left AA, if that was like a long time ago or if that was somewhat recently.
It's been 10 years. It's been 10 years since I left. It's really funny because even after everything I had been through, after all the treatment centers, the jails, the seizures, everything I had been through, I couldn't even tell people everything I've been through because I would seriously sound like one of these old timers making shit up. I mean, nobody would believe it if I told people what I went through, but there's still that part of me that really enjoyed drinking. I mean, I just loved, the drinking aspect of it. Towards the end, I guess after a little time away from AA, when I was starting to enjoy things again, I remembered what it was like at the end. You're sitting there at 2 a.m., you're drunk out of your mind, in a few hours you're going to start throwing up, you're going to start needing. I couldn't even enjoy it any longer because, like, if I was drinking liquor, the first thought in my mind is tomorrow I'm going to roll out of bed around 4 a.m. and I'm going to be reaching under the bed. I would panic buy liquor. I'm like, I can't deal with that sickness. For me, it wasn't like in the movies when give me some coffee and some aspirin over here. I had a rough night. It wasn't like that for me. For me, I would wake up dry heaving, retching, throwing up, shaking, and I would just have to drink an insane amount just to stop it. And it started happening to me even if I just drank a little. Like I would drink like a half pint, and then I'd wake up the next morning, I'm already going, like that. And I was like, the any kind of reward I was getting out of alcohol wasn't there anymore. Like I would drink alcohol and my depression would get worse. My anxiety would get worse. And most of all, my OCD would kick in. It's like in a couple of hours, you're going to be sweating and you're going to be throwing up and you're going to be having these nightmares. And I think for a while, I stayed away from it out of fear alone over that. I was like, I don't want to go through another hangover. I just don't want to go through another hangover. And early, maybe 6 or 7 months, which was the longest I had in a very, very, very long time. I remember saying, I'm going to drink a little tonight. It was the fall of the year. I love the seasons when they change, and especially the fall of the year. I said, I want to enjoy the fall, so I'm going to get me a 6-pack of beer. And then I thought, I don't like beer. If you ever saw me with a beer in my hand, if you'd have met me in my drinking days, if I had a beer in my hand, it was because I was trying to keep the buzz going until I could get to my booze. And I was like, I love bourbon in the fall. And I was going to pick some up, and I said, I can drink a little of this. And then another part of my mind was already thinking, okay, you're going to need some for in the morning. You know that. And then I was thinking to myself, okay, I can get a half pint for tomorrow morning when I wake up. And then I thought, but then by mid-afternoon, the pain's going to be back. And I realized what I was doing. I was planning a bender already. I was saying, okay, I'm going to drink a little tonight, but I know I'm going to need it in the morning. And I thought, I'm just not going to do that. And that was a huge win for me because I realized I chose to do that because in the past, especially in AA, when I would get that kind of thought in my mind, there was a feeling of, well, you've already lost the battle. You might as well just go. I mean, there were times I would walk past liquor stores in the old days and I'd be like, well, I don't want to do that tonight. And then that thought would be there and I'd think, I'm probably going to go do it anyway, because there was a part of me that just felt like if you feel this way, you're going to do it. And I would inevitably just give in. And when I first did that, I realized that I had control over this to some degree. And then there was an interesting thing. It's in literature. It was Marcel Proust was talking about a Madeleine that he tasted in tea, and he immediately was in childhood again. And I realized that my association with drinking, the buzz that I was feeling with the fall, that's a buzz that I felt when I was in my early 20s in my first apartment, feeling that's what I was trying to drink. I wasn't enjoying a drink. I was enjoying a memory. So that was a huge connection with that. In fact, there is some kind of psychological theory. I'm not sure how it works, but it was saying that like our favorite candy on some subconscious level, and I don't know how scientific accurate it is, but our favorite candy is our favorite candy because it puts us in a place where when we were a kid, we were eating that candy or it puts us in a moment. And I realized how many sensations in life are actually literally just me trying to be in a certain moment. And so I realized I wasn't drinking alcohol to drink alcohol. I was drinking alcohol to recapture a memory type of situation. And once you face that hurdle and gone through it a couple of times, it becomes a lot more easier. And it's really bizarre now that I don't even hardly think about it at all. I was at some concert type thing and there were people everywhere, getting hammered around me. And it was literally no issue there at all. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was enjoying the show. You'd hear in AA meetings, well, today when I go to a holiday Christmas party, I get some water with some lemon and then I run past the door. I was like, well, I don't feel like that at all now. I see people drinking all the time and it doesn't do anything to me. I mean, it's just not there. And it was really funny. Someone I had kept up in touch with briefly who had left AA before me, he met me at a meeting. This was maybe a year or two before I left. And he said, I just don't feel like I'm going to go back to drinking any longer. And someone said, well, what are you going to do when the obsession comes back? And he kind of got angry. He said, well, if that was the case, nobody would ever quit drinking. We'd all just crave alcohol the rest of our lives and keep relapsing. And that was a huge thing for me. It's like, okay, if I'm trying to plan a bender, then I'm literally the one who's doing it to myself, and there have been moments where I would think about it and I would say, today'd be a good day for a drink. It doesn't have that power that AA had. But AA, it's a thought crime. You thought about drinking, therefore this happens. There's just been times I've thought to myself out loud, today'd be a great day to drink. And then I just don't ever follow through. It's fleeting. It's not like I'm a slave to an addiction or there's this monster called relapse lurking behind the corner around me. It's like, today'd be a good day for a drink. And if I play with that thought long enough, it's like, yeah, but today's not a good day for a hangover and vomiting and throwing up and doing that. And another thing was I owed, at the time I left AA, I owed thousands and thousands of dollars in legal fines, and I owed hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars. Well, it probably wasn't that much. It felt like that. I mean, when you're borderline penniless, $4,000 debt is like $1 million. You might as well say $5 million. But I slowly but surely had this idea of what am I going to work on first here? Okay, because my life is gone. And I said, I want to drive again one day, so I'm going to work on my legal fines first. And that's what I did. I would pay minimum payments on everything with what little money I had, and I put more on the legal fines. And it was funny. There was a police officer when I was downtown at one point. He said, I don't even know why you're here. You'll never drive ever again. And now I've been through 2, 3 cars since then.
Awesome. I love that. And I think that that's so powerful and helpful for people. It's you rebuilt your life after AA, and that was also like in your getting sober, brick by brick. You were strategic. What area do I want to improve first? And I think that is such a healthy way to break it down because when we have so many areas that we want to improve, it can be overwhelming. So I love how you just simplified it. What's the most important? My license is the goal. What's the way there? The legal bills. How do I do that? I got to do payments. And I just think that as simple as that sounds, it could be very hard to remember that when we're overwhelmed by everything.
I realize now what was fueling a lot of my benders. It's so obvious now in retrospect, but the last 4 years of AA, it was my license my license is gone. I haven't got any chance of ever getting a decent career again. I'm never going to be able to go see the places I want to see. I mean, this is all I've got left is this garage and these meetings. And it gives you such an utterly crushing feeling to say, this is how it's all going to end, for me right here. And I think that fueled the benders because it's like, well, if you've got nothing to look forward to and no hope of anything ever again, why even try? At this point, why not just, go on a bender and hope you don't wake up out of the bender, or something like that. And now that is another thing that counters what AA says. It says, material things don't matter and you can't get sober for other people. And, all this other thing, that was a crucial thing for me as well, because there was one point where I actually had some money in savings at the end of a work week. And I was thinking, I want this new electronic gadget because I'm shameless about those. And I said, I can go buy that. And that was a big deal for me. And then another part of me was like, you could also go get you a fifth. And it was like, no, I fought really hard to get right here, right now. And I'm going to go enjoy that goddamned electrical gadget. And I'm going to have a good time tonight with myself. And I'm not going to fuck this all up. The more stuff I was starting to accumulate and the more I was starting to kind of get a reason to live again, it was like, I don't want to go back to that any longer. And I'm not going back to that any longer. There was probably a spiteful thing on my part. I wasn't going to die until I prove all those bastards right, so I just kept getting blocked and I kept sending them videos until they all blocked me. But like I said, I had so much anger, towards the whole entire thing. I remember like one Christmas Eve, it was starting to rain and it was like 20 degrees outside. Everybody was there. We're just here to help other people. It's all about the newcomer. And I was walking in this freezing cold, pouring down rain, and they just drive right by me and they'd hit puddles, water and come all, and I was like, I'm going to survive and I'm going to get you bastards and I won't stop. And it was almost like some kind of movie. It was like, I am the storm. I am vengeance and I'm going to get you for this. The anger is not like it used to be. I can still get really irritated when I get to thinking about it, or like when I see an AA commenter on a Reddit forum or something like that. But like the literal hate that was literally pulling me forward is subsided considerably.
Yeah. Well, it's like a proper trauma. It sounds traumatic, your experience there at the end. And I think a lot of us, I still feel like I have some PTSD from AA in like how I'm trying to even trust myself more. Some of my thinking still goes to this idea of a higher power and waiting and praying. I'm still rewiring my brain and I still feel uncomfortable in certain situations that remind me of AA. So I'm still working through it's my nervous system. I know trauma is like a big word or whatever, but the anger is fine. We're allowed to be angry out here. Anger is a normal human emotion, just like having bones is part of being a human. So I love that anger is a part of my life. When I'm angry, I feel angry. But it sounds like you really had a lot of anger to process when you left. What helps you navigate your anger these days now that you're not doing 10 steps, turning it over and all of that? How do you navigate your being a human, your anger?
Like I said, I spend a lot of time with, it's why I refer to him on the channel as my old friend Plato over here, or my
Oh,
old friend. I spend a lot of time with literature. I spend a lot of time with off the wall artistic type films and old movies that a lot of people. I'm always hesitant when someone says, "What's your favorite movie?" I'm like, well, if I named it and you went and watched it, you would hate it because it's bizarre, it's symbolic, it's in a foreign language, and all of that. I guess my life is kind of rich today in a way where
mm,
there are so many things that I have going on that it's just not center stage any longer. Like I have so many negative people in my comment section that think that they seem to have this idea that all I do is wake up in the morning angry at AA, making videos angry at AA. They're like, you don't do anything but make videos. I'm like, I do so many things in my life today that has nothing to do with AA, but it's not a central focal point of my existence. But they seem to have this idea that I'm just this guy, trapped in a room somewhere, yelling about how much I hate AA day in and day out. I mean, for a while, that was very much a part of it. I have a really tiny circle of people that are close to me today. That's another interesting thing. AA makes you think that you got to be liked by everybody.
mm.
You know? And even in the workplace, like you were talking about with the deprogramming thing, there were people that were assholes. And a part of me was immediately thinking, what's my part in this? And I was thinking I needed to apologize to them. I remember one guy who was an asshole to me for really no reason. I thought, I'm not going to apologize to someone. You should apologize to me. And it was like, I'm going to reclaim my power, But
Yes.
what you're talking about, there is that part of me that if someone was irritated with me for a long time, I was like, I must have done something to deserve that. There was something I read about. It's a bias. It's called just world bias, that people have a tendency, and I'm guilty of this too, to think that the world is going to turn out fairly, or that
Mm,
life is kind of fair in some kind of way. So oftentimes, like a survivor of a trauma, we'll try to actually compartmentalize, and we'll say things like, oh, I must have done something to deserve that, or I must have spoken out of turn, or I must have been at fault with this, which is really, really dangerous, for victims of abuse. And then they come to AA and they're told you are to blame for all of it. But there's a historian I like to listen to named Heather Cox Richardson. I love the quote, even though it's not 100% true, but it's a nice, uplifting kind of quote. She said, the good guys always win in the end. She was talking about the political landscape. And so if it looks like the bad guys are winning, it's because the story's not over yet. And I was like, I like that. It may not be true. There's a lot of injustice in the world, but yeah, that bias, I think AA amps that up. It's like you're saying, I need a higher power for this. I need to apologize to people that I have no reason to apologize to them. And I don't care if these people like me or not. I haven't done anything wrong. I mean,
such freedom in that.
yeah, it's the true new freedom, new happiness that they're always talking
Yeah.
about.
If I kind of still vibe with the when I'm wrong, I promptly admit it thing. Like if my lower self comes out and I call it my inner C. I know people don't like that word in America, but so many of my friends are Australians that like I say the C word, I have an inner C, you know what I mean? And sometimes that part of me comes out. And if I offend somebody, I will, when I'm wrong, promptly admit it. But if somebody doesn't like me or somebody, I'm not responsible for other people. This is like a new awakening. It's like there's been a part of me deeply ingrained from AA ideology or the indoctrination where I feel like I'm responsible for other people's life or journey or sobriety or whatever. And I'm not like I'm almost all shedding that, but just seeing that recently, I was like, oh, there's still a part of me that feels like I'm supposed to do like I have to be of service no matter what. I have to victimize myself to or self-sacrifice or be a martyr or something. And that
Yeah,
I never had that before I went to AA. And I'm still like, get this martyr thing out of me. Like, what is this bullshit? No, I'm responsible for me.
I remember when I had first got a vehicle, when I finally was able to get behind the wheel and drive again, I first got a car. I was at a gas station and I was pulling up, and this guy came up to me. I don't know if he was homeless. I don't know if he was crazy. I don't know what was going on, but he's like, man, I need a ride somewhere. Give me a ride up the street. And then I said, no. And when I was driving away, I was driving away thinking, did I do the wrong thing? Maybe I should have given him a ride. I've been a borderline homeless before. I would have wanted a ride. And literally, I felt like I had done something wrong. And there was this part of me that was thinking, my God, what if I'm punished for this? And I'm like, there's nothing lurking in the sky that's going to strike you with lightning and make you go on a drunken bender because you told a complete stranger that you did not know that, no, I can't give you a ride. I'm going somewhere else. And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't honest. I said I was in a hurry. And I was like, you don't have to do, but I was literally analyzing that all the way home. And I'm like, you're this half a wise guy from Jersey. What the hell's wrong with you? You're worried? But
Yeah.
I know exactly what you're talking about. Like someone asked me for money and I felt guilty by saying no, even though I really didn't have the money. But then there was this part of me of, I'm going to be punished for this. I mean, there's going to be a karmic wheel that's going to come around and get me. I'm going to be desperate and nobody's going to help me. I mean, that's not real, you know.
Totally. I mean, and part of that probably you got instilled that in as for a young age. If you grew up Catholic, right? I didn't grow up with religion, but a lot of that goes really deep. The control with the guilt, the control, the reason why when we get trapped in cults like Alcoholics Anonymous, people say the door is always open. But no, it lives in our mind. Like we can't leave because of the guilt. We have to be there to help the newcomer, or because the fear, like I'm gonna die if I leave. It's the control is in our own mind because we've been indoctrinated into this bullshit and then we believe it. Then therefore we're controlling ourselves through somebody else's ideas.
Yeah, that's 100%. Because I did give rides to people that were really shady when I had a car that was really kind of harrowing and frightening. And then when I complained about it in AA, they would say things to me like, well, I mean, do you want to keep it? You got to give it away. The funny thing is none of these old timers do that for anybody. I mean, none of them. You don't see any old timers helping anybody. But you're told you have to do that. Well, you're going to have to keep it away if you didn't get it. And that's another thing. They would always say you can't broadcast something you don't have. I'm like, all you assholes in here don't do any of this shit. But I feel guilty about that. And I literally, whenever someone told me a problem, you know, in the past, before AA, I've always kind of had a small social circle in life, but I generally would just be a sympathetic ear and listen, because 99% of the times when you got a friend who's talking to you, they don't want to be told what to do, you know. And there's a part of me after leaving AA, when someone would tell me a problem, I would immediately start thinking to myself, I got to figure out a way to help them fix this problem. And I'm like, you don't have to do that. You don't have to give them a slogan. You don't have to tell them, have you ever considered this?
Live and let live. It sounds like there's a lot of things that you did to help you deprogram and leave AA and to rebuild your life. One of the things I heard is you went to the library and you read a lot of books. You educated yourself. And another thing that you did is you developed hobbies. Like one of them that you mentioned, I would say, is with literature or movies and all that. It sounds like you got hobbies, you connected with people outside of AA and you built a small circle. You started rebuilding your life. Was there anything else that you did that we haven't mentioned yet that really helped you leave AA for good and be on the new path where you felt like you had the power to not drink and you had the power to change your life and help you step into that?
I guess if it's something we hadn't covered, I guess it would be the accomplishments that started happening along the way. Like when I finally left that supermarket for a better paying position, the manager over that whole entire store, as I was leaving, he did actually say to me, well, look, if you ever need a job again and I'm here, you know you got one. And it was like these little small victories, because I was engaged in so much negative self-talk about myself in AA that, and I'm not saying that, you know, there's this idea that I'm doing like a certain politician who's running things right now. I am the best at this type of thing, but I'm just saying that I realize it's okay to accept a compliment. It's okay to win a victory. It's okay to get a raise. You know, it's okay to actually have a friend that says a nice thing about you, you know. And I realized that 99% of everything that I would do in AA was just negative self-talk all the time. One line that I had for a very long time in the real world that I finally managed to stop saying is I would say, like I was telling a coworker one time about this 1960s Italian movie that I had watched with all the symbolism, and I said, how sick is that? It's not sick at all. It sounds like you're interested in movies. What are you talking about? You're sick, you know. But I would say that a lot to people. I would say, you know, I spent 11 hours working on this computer, you know, just to get this computer fixed. And I'd say, isn't that crazy? Aren't I sick? You know, and they'd be like, what are you talking about? You wanted to fix it, you know. It was funny. I don't really have a close relationship with any of my family members today, but I remember, but my uncle, I still, and my aunt and a few others, but I remember giving him like these AA quizzes at one point. And he looks a lot like Paulie on The Sopranos. I don't know if you ever watched that show or not, but I had said, do you ever think like maybe you should run the show and it's a bad thing because you think you should run the show? And he'd say, no. And I would say, you know, well, don't you ever feel like that you're not looking at your part in things? And he would say, no. And then he would say, where's this shit coming from, man? But it was like every question I would ask is like, you know, do you feel like if the show doesn't come off well, that maybe you should have more control over your life or something like that? Maybe, you know, and then he would look at me and he'd go, no. It was like, I don't know what you're speaking. Totally. I think I addressed that in another video not too long ago. I said I could walk into a meeting right now and I could say today was all about self-will run riot. I was into my character defects today, and everybody in that room would know exactly what I was talking about. But you say that in the real world, and everybody kind of does like my uncle. No, I don't know what you're talking about. I even made it a point to not do that at one point. I said, I am not going to keep talking like these people for the rest of my life. But that was a major one, is that, you know, I would always say, well, how sick is that about myself? And I realized, why am I saying that? There's nothing sick about anything I'm doing here. But I would literally say that. I was like, you know, I took off work early. I cleared it with the manager, but I didn't tell him I was going to this concert or this show or whatever. And then I'd say, that's sick, isn't it? I'm like, that's not sick. That's normal.
It's human. Yeah. So there's a lot of things that you did that I heard. Another thing that I heard that you did was, well, you had to change the lingo and the language, but you also learned more about your brain, it sounds like, with the OCD. You got to understand yourself better, and you found a lens other than alcoholism and then fatal progressive Bill's baloney. You found a lens that actually fit you better, that helped you. I think that was super important for me as well when I left AA, was to find other lenses that actually fit me better than this self-diagnosis in a church basement baloney. Yeah. I love that. I love that. There's so much that you said that I think is so valuable. I'm curious if you wanted to speak to what's been the best part about dissenting, like having your deprogramming. Oh, and by the way, for anybody who doesn't know, the YouTube channel, I'll link it below. It's Quackaholics Anonymous. I love that name. I secretly, affectionately call you Quacky in my own mind. It's Quacky. And so what has been like the best part about dissenting, about having the YouTube channel and being out with your message of AA as a cult religion?
The main thing is the feedback, because I really do feel it's important that this thing gets exposed for what it is. I would probably do the videos if nobody was watching. If I had like 20 subscribers, I would still continue to do them. But when I get feedback from people that say, man, this helps me a lot, or I recently had someone say, I'm living in one of those halfway sober living houses, and I'm sitting here watching this, and you just don't know how much this is a lifesaver. And I remember when I was hopelessly trapped into that particular cult meeting, it would have been nice to have had this. And of course, today there's several of us now. There's you, there's, Burn the Stigma and all of that. But I think there is this drive inside of me to be that voice for that person that was in that same boat I was in, where you feel like you're going totally insane and that you deserve to die. And you can turn on and you can see someone saying that's bullshit. Of course, I'm a little bit more crude in my delivery. I get all emotional and wrapped up and carried away, and I'm never sure if I'm losing the plot or not. But as for the term quackaholic, I actually can't claim credit for that. There was I always thought it was funny because the group online, it was a Facebook group where when I had first joined it, everybody was insulting everybody. Everybody was threatening to kill one another. They were threatening violence towards one another. They were calling each other idiots and all kinds of weird slang words that I didn't even know existed. but the name of the group was Rational Scientific Discussion. I had put up a post, well, none of this really matters because it's all going to fry in universe heat death at the end of time anyway. I was in one of my real depressive moods, and there was this guy, he had a profile picture of his cat. It was this big, huge, gray cat that appeared underneath me, and he typed, no. He typed, there is not going to be a universe heat death. And then he said, obviously, you're one of those people that reads from a whole lot of quackademia. And he said, you're an expert. And I love that term. I mean, usually when someone comes at me like that, I'm angry, but I collapsed laughing over that because I had become a friend of his on Facebook, and he literally caused a science magazine to get their comments shut down because he was arguing. He posted the article and he said, these people don't like it when their quackademia gets questioned. That gelled with me so much that I said Quackaholics. And that's where that comes from, by the way. But yeah, that's probably the most freeing, the best part about this is getting that feedback and feeling like there was something I did one time. I know some people think it's bullshit therapy, but there was a thing called MDR I did when I was in a treatment center. And one of the things they had in this thing was it was saying when you were at your worst vulnerable moment in life, when you were at your lowest point, or when you were helpless, or when you were this, if you were there as your older self now, what would you say to that person? And that kind of symbolically is what the channel is me talking to the people in that boat, just like me, because I know there's hundreds of thousands of people in this boat right now that are being court-ordered into these meetings, that are being abused by their sponsors, taken advantage of financially, that are sitting around drinking themselves to death thinking I'm a bad person. And there's a part of me that's over here screaming, I'm going to blow the lid on all this. So it really, that's a real good thing to realize that there are people who watch it and they do feel helped by it.
Yeah.
But
it's a great, yeah, it sounds like you found a purpose that's really meaningful to part of you today, but also part of you is I don't know, what I really like here, but also I might be just saying what I also feel about myself is you're being who you needed then. And I find such purpose in being who I needed when I was going through a hard time. And it sounds like that's what's working for you as well is nobody gave that message when you were going through those 4 years, and that when your sponsor is flipping a table and then going to a meeting that night saying that he's, amazing or whatever, you needed to hear someone tell you the truth that could have helped you break free sooner and get free sooner and rebuild sooner. You're being the voice that was missing. I love that.
accusation that you're just doing this for clicks, likes,
Yeah, you're doing this for views. I'm like, if I wanted views, I wouldn't talk about a cult. This is like the worst way. I started my YouTube channel in 2012. Nobody gave a fuck about anything I said, meaning I did not have haters daily. I did not get abused daily until 6 months ago. So I was fine doing my own thing, not talking about AA. I just felt compelled to talk about it because I didn't feel like there were enough voices being very honest to give. I have a different story than you, and I have a different approach than you. And I think there's space for a lot of us. And I just felt like I have to, like you in the red phase, I felt like I was a volcano and I couldn't make it not explode anymore. And the lava needed to flow the fuck out. And I just couldn't stop. So no, if I wanted clicks, I would not talk about a cult. Trust me.
Clicks, I would talk pro AA because you go to a pro AA channel, they got millions of views and all of that. I'll be perfectly honest. There was a huge relief when I found you and Burn the Stigma and others out there. I was like, I'm not by myself in all of this, because that at times was kind of intimidating and frightening. It was like, I'm alone out here in this. I wished I had some allies, and now, you got Emma I think you interviewed Emma not too long ago with the Groupthink podcast, and, there's other voices out here. So it's so nice to realize that I'm not by myself doing this, because like you said, the different, like I come on so strongly because I saw the absolute worst that AA has to offer. I saw what it was like when you fail, and I think there are people out there that are probably going to see the channel and be like, well, no, I didn't have it that bad. I don't know if, they might be suspicious, but then they hear people like you who, it sounds like you actually.
I loved it. I literally cried on Bill Wilson's grave. I loved it. I was full on true believer, culted like you wouldn't believe. And now I don't feel guilty anymore that I culted other people, meaning I sponsored and shared in meetings. But part of me being honest about it now is like I misled a lot of people by preaching it for 10 years and I loved it. And now I'm like, oh,
My first 2 years, I did love it. I mean, my first year in there, I was like, wow, I finally figured out what was wrong with me. But like you pointed out, anytime I had a personality quirk, I was like, oh, well, I'm an alcoholic. That's all it is. But yeah, at that time, it was the early 2000s. I'd turn on a TV show and I'd see one of the characters is in AA. And I was like, well, I'm part of this, And I was all into it, my first year. And it was so cringeworthy. I mean, and like you said, there were so many people that would come to me and they would tell me about something they saw shady or something they knew that was going on, and I would give them the same bullshit. Let's just try not to drink and take it one day at a time. We got to focus on ourselves. There was a channel, I don't know which, there was two channels. They didn't ever talk like we're talking, but it was like called Godless Panther, I think is the channel. And he hasn't done anything in years, but he had a video called Our Amends, if I could find it. But in the beginning, he said, these are our amends for all the times we told people to do a step, for all the times we told people to call a sponsor, to all the times we told people they needed to pray. This is our amends. And I kind of like that idea.
yeah. Yeah, it's our living amends. So you talked about how at the end of your time in AA, it sounded like you were talking about you had lost hope for a better future, hope for a job that whatever, loss of hope that this is how it's always going to be. And then you talked about at some point after you left AA, you started having hope again. Your coworkers invited you and you started like awakening to more hope. And I'm just wondering if you could like take a moment and imagine that version of you that was hopeless still in AA. And if you could speak to them about what life would be like leaving, what would you want that version of you to know?
That there is a life beyond. And that even with people that I call my friends now, even something Plato says, I might say, I don't agree with him there. Or I might say, I don't agree with this philosopher here. Or I don't agree with this guy here. It's okay. You can think for yourself. You don't have to be in a box. You don't need an identity. Get rid of the identity and just be, I think is what I would probably tell them.
Yeah, I love that so much. When a couple months ago, maybe like 5 months ago, you kept saying, I was watching your YouTube, and you kept referring to AA as a cult religion. And I hadn't really seen it as a cult religion again yet, because I knew it was a cult religion before I ever went. And the night that I first went, I knew I was walking into a cult religion. But AA obviously programmed me that they're not a cult and they're not a religion, right? Spiritual, not religious. And we need the brainwashing, but we're not a cult. And then I was watching your channel, and I was already dissenting at this point. I was already talking about it on my YouTube channel. And you kept calling AA a cult religion. And I kept noticing I would crack up and I would just start laughing. And I even left you a couple comments. Like every time you say cult religion, I like spit out my coffee. And then I was like, well, wait a minute. What do I think about this? Right. And there comes the critical thinking. And so I did my research, my due diligence. I found ways to measure cults, like official checklists or whatever. And I went through and I took the time and I popped out of doing that. And I turned it into like a playlist on YouTube. But I was like, oh, it is a cult religion. But I just like, I really appreciate you because you just say it it's so casually, and I literally would like spit out drinks and stuff. I just like it. So I know you're saying your approach isn't for everybody, but it might actually, I mean, there's such truth and freedom. And like, I really enjoy how you just share what you believe to be true and activate a lot of, critical thinking in those of us who watch you, including me. So I really appreciate you and the work you've done in your channel. And I know it hasn't been easy because I know those trolls be coming, those AA defenders, the steppers are relentless. So I really appreciate you. And yeah.
I'm also glad you're out here because I really do think we need a variety of voices talking on this thing. And you're a different perspective and a different voice that comes to this. I mean, if you had a bunch of guys like me out there, everybody would think, well, I didn't have a bad experience with AA, but I think that's interesting that, like you said, you didn't have the horror stories, but you still saw it for what it is. And I think that's kind of interesting as well, because that kind of corrects a bias on my part. For a long time, I thought, well, if you're having a good time in AA, you're never going to see it for what it is, as a matter of fact. And now you proved me wrong on that one completely. Because no, go ahead.
And the thing is, I would like to say now is that I thought I was having, when I was in AA, I loved it and I believed I was having a good time. But now that I'm out of A and I've done a lot of deconstructing, I would say, no, I was being like mentally and emotionally like manipulated, abused, knocked down. My self-esteem was slowly slipping year by year that I was in AA because I was being taught that I can't trust my thinking. I can't make my decision-making abilities were disabled. So I enjoyed it when I was in it the same way that but I was completely getting disabled over the years that I was staying there immersed. And then even worse, I was turning around and doing the same thing to other people. So I thought I liked it. But then, you know what? You talk about like Patty Hearst or something, you know, that Patty Hearst who ended up with her captor, she got abused and tortured really, really badly. And then she became she went and robbed a bank with them, you know, the Munchausen syndrome or whatever it's called, or I don't know all the terms here. But all I'm saying is when I was in the cult, I was like drunk on the Kool-Aid, like I'm metaphorically drunk on the Kool-Aid. And in hindsight, I'm like, no, like that wasn't good what was happening. So I did love it. And when people always say in the comments, like, oh, you had a bad experience, I'm like, no, bro, the whole thing is a bad experience.
I've been in your comment section a few times, and I remember you said looks like someone brought their whole home group here. And that happened to me on one video. It was called How the AA Cult Sucks People In. And for a little while, every time I would log into my YouTube, I'd have like 20 nasty comments. And then I would answer all of them. And then the next day I'd log in, 20 more nasty comments. I said, where the hell are all you people coming from? And now I probably realize somebody went to their home group and probably said, you know, there are some people, there's this one guy on YouTube, you know how they are. And he said it's a cult, and everybody probably laughed, you know, and then they went and looked at it and they were like, you know, whatever. I mean, Burn the Stigma said one time that if she had seen her on YouTube when she was in it, that she would have literally been one of those people. She'd have been like, oh my God, these people are dangerous. I know in my early years in AA, it would have bothered me to hear this, but a part of me, being OCD like I am, I would have probably just thought about it and obsessed about it. And I would have come to the same old, I call it AA apologetics. I would have just said, well, yeah, there's a lot of wrong with the program, but the program is perfect. It's just the people. There's a few bad people. Really? And I would have had a way to compartmentalize it and justify it. I just said, well, maybe they have something legitimate they're talking about. Or I would have probably said they met the wrong people in AA. If I saw me when I was a new cult member, I would have probably felt a zeal to save me. I would have been like, oh, you went to the wrong meeting. You should come to my home group. And it would have been the same shit.
Totally. Yeah, I had somebody tell me in a DM, I really like your videos. They're really important. They're really needed. I took a photo of the phone number list in my meeting and I texted everybody the link to your video. I'm like, oh.
My videos to a lot of people who wrote me off. So, you know,
enter all the hater comments in droves. I'm like, I don't want AA to find my videos. I mean, whatever. But like, I'm not, that's not who I'm here for. I have no desire to change anybody's mind. Like literally zero. Like that's AA shit for me. When you're trying to like control someone's mind, no. But if you already realize, if you're 1 foot in, 1 foot out, and you're wondering if you're the only one who thinks that way, or if you're out and you're like, what the fuck? I mean, I had the biggest mind fuck when I left AA. That's what this is for.
When you're living, like you said, when you're living in this thing 24/7, because you take all that stuff home with you. There's a part of me, because I went daily for years. I mean, I've heard people say, well, I never made 90 and 90. I went every single day for years. And it's only an hour a day, but you take all that home with you and you're surrounded by it. And then all your social settings are it. It looks normal, you know, and that's a big thing. Like when you're away from it for a little while, some of the things I put up with, I was like, that doesn't even make sense. Why was I buying into this, you know? But
totally.
I didn't maintain any connections with anybody when I left. I didn't know if you still have any connections. I mean, I've heard people say they're still friends with AA people, but the few AA people I had connections with had bad experiences with it. But after a period of time. There was one last guy that I was pretty friendly with, and he came to me and he said, if all you do is rant and rave about AA, then you never left AA anyway. So why don't you just come back to it? And I was like, well, that's it. That's all of them. I mean, but I didn't know if you ever have any contact with people or not, as far as.
I still have a lot of friends that I met in AA, or the people that I know from AA, but only one of them is still in AA. So the ones that have left. So when I came out of the closet like 6 months ago on the internet, a lot of my AA friends, well, first, the ones that are still in AA try to convince me, come to my meeting. It's different. I have a disease. I go to a good meeting. I was like, I don't have a disease. Ooh. And then a lot of people blocked me, and a lot of people like came at me with daggers, right? And then one person who's currently still in AA that I knew from AA, she actually, we got on the phone and she's like, I don't care if you're in AA or not, we're friends. Like, and by friends, like we talked once on the phone in the past couple of years, right? But we're Facebook friends. So it's casual, like really like not inner circle stuff here. But I had 3 sponsees when I left AA, and I'm still friends with all of them. They also left AA after I did. Like they asked me questions like, why did you leave AA? And so I slowly told them why I left AA over a period of months. I'm the one who convinced them that it was true. Then they're asking me like, why don't you believe this anymore? And one of them tried to like get me back in AA, and I was like, this feels so gross, but I understand. And then so they left. One of them, we text every day, one of my old sponsees. Like we're still really close. These people they're gone. They understand. They've deconstructed. So I have a handful of people I'd say that have left AA that know that I'm safe, because you're not safe if you're still in AA. It's not safe. People, they're trying to control you. They want to come at you. They want to, yeah, it's not safe, or stop you.
Yeah, yeah. But then again, like I said, I was on the bottom, so everybody kind of had this idea that I was just broken and needed to be fixed. So even the few people that I was still talking to, they still approached me from the angle of, you're hopelessly broken. Or they just say, you're crazy, or something like that. And finally, that was kind of just a final straw when he said, if you're going to make videos about AA, you've never left AA anyway. I was like, well, way to miss the entire point of why I'm doing this. People should never speak out about corruption. I guess people should never speak out about what the lady did with Scientology. I can't think of a name. I guess none of us should ever do that. We should just walk away and let the abuse keep happening and do nothing about it. You know, I was like, I'm not doing this because I'm just pissed off at AA. I'm doing this because I want people to know the things that I wished I had known, you know. But
Totally. They make it about you and your emotions and your intentions and yeah, instead of actually about what you're saying. And it's a cop out. And the people who tend to do that are the ones who are inflicting the harm themselves, but they won't ever realize that they're inflicting the harm. And by harm, I don't mean that they're like abusive, like they would go to jail. What by harm, I mean they're convincing people that they're powerless. They're giving them learned helplessness. They're telling them they have to free labor for the rest of their life. So they conveniently don't have to look at any of the harm that they're actually currently causing, because they're going to turn your message, they're going to make it about the messenger and not the message.
yeah, that's very, very true. And there's no way you would actually know what someone else's motivations are anyway. So if you're telling someone what their motivations are, you have no way of determining that unless the person tells you that. There were all these people in AA used to tell me what you really think and what you really are feeling and what you really want. And I don't remember when it struck me, but I thought, where is that coming from? Because I never, unless you do something that gives me a reason to think you might be doing it this way, I have no reason to think that. Like if someone came up to me and said, I'm dedicated in my church, I sing in the choir, I go to Sunday school and all that, it wouldn't occur to me to say to him, oh, well, you don't really believe that. You don't really think like that. You're doing this because you just want people to believe that. It never occurred to me if someone was telling me I'm involved in this type of thing. Oh, well, you're not really involved in it. You're just involved in it so people will like you being involved in it. In fact, I turned that around on a guy one time and he blocked me, but on Facebook, he came to me, he's like, I know the steps work. And I said, oh, well, you don't really believe that, do you? You just want people to believe you do, that the steps work, And he's like, no, God saved my life. I said, oh, you don't really believe that, do you? You just want people to think that. He didn't like that when his shoe was on the other foot, but you have no way of knowing what someone's motivated by. I mean, how do they make these determinations of what I'm really thinking and what I'm really feeling? The only way they could do that is if they're projecting their own thoughts onto me. I mean, you have no way of knowing what I'm thinking or why I'm doing this, man.
Totally. That's why I started my little mini series on my channel called Culty Comments, because I was just getting so many bullshit comments that I was like, let's just address these. I don't even want to reply to the comments about how they're bullshit because it's a waste of time. They probably can't hear me, but I'm going to reply in a full-on video to these comments that are clearly inside, like indoctrinated, so that we can deconstruct them together because they're not going to hear me. But maybe if you're leaving AA, hearing me deconstruct it will be beneficial. It won't be a waste of my time. It'll be valuable, but I can still address it. But I realize that replying to the comments, I do sometimes still, but a lot of the times it's just wasted energy because they can't hear and they'll get quite vicious.
You manage to stay as calm as you do when you're doing that, because I lose my temper. I'm like, when they come at me with something really shitty, I'm not going to say, let me try to understand you. I've tried it, but that's not me. I mean, I have a short fuse about that kind of thing. I mean, sometimes I will walk away from the computer and I will have to think about how I want to come back at them. And usually I come back at them with, this is where you're completely wrong. This is where you're making assertions or whatever. But I'll hear you say, I want you to really understand you. And I'm like, no, I don't want to understand you. I want you to die, you asshole, but I just wonder how you manage to maintain your calm and cool like that. I wished I could, but I can't.
Well, you totally could. There's always room for growth in all areas, I believe, and if you wanted to grow in empathy towards steppers, I don't know if that's a worthy goal, but if it felt like it was, you could for sure work on empathies towards steppers. For me, now look, I'm not fully skilled in it. I went on TikTok for like 5 days really, and I just freaked out because they're relentless there. And I was like, this is I mean, it was like 90% abuse and 10% like non-abusive comments. And I was like, I can't do this. It's gonna fuck with my mental health. And that's not what I'm here to do. I'm not here to be abused like that level. But as far as YouTube goes, like I've gotten some really, really bad comments on YouTube. But I started YouTube over a decade ago, like in 2012. And some of the first comments I got, I mean, somebody literally said, the word starts with R. I'm gonna like rape you, and went into detail about it. I've just gotten so many horrific comments that I think like at some point in my YouTube experience, I decided that the way that I wanted to deal with comments was through empathy. I wanted to be able to see where they're coming from before I respond. And so I always try to find where they're right. And they're not always right. I can't always find it, but often when I really look deeper, because I feel like there's usually a kernel of truth, and that's where everything comes from. Like they're making a point or they're scared or whatever. So if I can really try to put myself into their shoes and get them. Now, some of the people are just too far gone in what they say. It's not even worth it. But a lot of people, if I can actually find empathy and really understand where they're coming from and then speak from that place, a lot of them we end up in an actual like dialogue with each other, and I find that rewarding, not because I want to change their mind, not because I agree with them, but because I actually want to have everyone's viewpoint. I don't want this to be the Kirsten's opinion only show. I want to be able to have conversations with people. Not everybody wants to have a conversation with me, but I want to be able to engage with people who believe, look, I know it's a cult religion and I don't need people not to believe that, but I still would like, if they're able and willing, to be able to converse on something, find some common thread or something.
I think you hit on a crucial point that I hadn't thought about, because there's been a lot of times I have started out comments at people with, well, I'm going to have to respectfully disagree with you here, and this is why I disagree with you. If someone is coming at me and they look like they want an honest dialogue, then I'm pretty much open for that. But when you just go straight on insult attack mode, and I guess that's what I realized, because 99% of what I get is insult attack mode, probably because of the way I come. If you come to my channel, I can't wait for you to drink yourself to death and die, you piece of shit. I'm not going to be nice. So, but there have been many comments where someone will say something to me about, they'll just open it up like they're actually wanting to talk. And if you're wanting to talk, I will start out with, hey, I don't necessarily agree with this. This is why I don't agree with you. So yeah, it is all about tone. If someone comes to me and they look like they want to talk, I'm willing to talk. But when someone's just ready to go on attack mode, then I just generally lose my temper at that point. But
yeah, well, I don't like to be attacked either, and I get dysregulated as well. I'm a human, and I do find certain tones or words word choices, like very dysregulating.
The guy I was telling you about that does the live call-in show, he's always talking about not losing his temper, but of course it's more funny when he does. But I've had people call in I've seen them call in and they'll say something really ugly, and then he'll try to address them, and you can almost see his temper's going. And then they'll say something else. He'll say, look, they'll say, if you want to have a discussion, I will have a discussion. And then they'll say, but if you're just calling in here to insult and complain and moan, and like, I knew he was going to say that, but I think that is what it is. I mean, if you want to have a discussion, I will have the discussion. I will have the debate. But if you're just going to come at me to just insult me and then walk away saying, oh, I owned him by, saying that, then no, I'm probably not going to respond too happily. But if you're spamming the channel, I'm just going to get rid of you.
Totally.
Because if you leave me like 50 comments and they're all just insults and attacks, I'm like, okay, you don't want a discussion, so I'm done with them at that point. But yeah, that is true. I think if you really wanted, like if someone came to me and said, I'm in AA and I don't really feel that what you're saying is accurate, I would be willing to have that dialogue with them, I would be more than happy to have that dialogue with them. I mean, I would say, this is why I think the way I think. Like if you said, why are you calling it a religious cult? I would have an answer. This is why I'm calling it a religious cult. It's absolutist. It doesn't leave room for disagreement. It kind of takes on the voice of God for you. It tells, even though it says you can believe, I would have an answer for that. I wouldn't go for attack if someone asked me that,
Sure. There's also, I've taken on, since I started dissenting against AA, or doing deconstructing AA content, which really was only been since April. It really hasn't been that long. But I also went hog wild. It's already been over like 120 videos. So it's already been a lot of the perspective that I took on, which I'm choosing to take on, but it feels accurate to me. And I don't say this in an arrogant way, because it might actually sound arrogant, but I think you're going to get what I'm saying here. I don't know how the people watching are going to hear this, but I feel like someone wants to fight with me and that their tool to fight with me is a stick and I have a machine gun or something. That's how I feel when people from AA come at me. And the reason, and I don't say that because I'm arrogant, but it really feels like I got the gun at the knife fight, but they don't even have a knife, they have a stick. And the reason why that's my perspective is because I can see that you are a prisoner and a warden of yourself. You're not only incarcerated, you're also the one keeping yourself incarcerated, but you don't know it. And all I'm doing, essentially, this is a metaphor, is saying the door is open. Yes, it's okay to walk free. This is how I walked free. These are the things to understand on your walk out. Here's how you collect your clothes, your money, and this is the front door, where the front door is. And I'm talking about the steps out of the jail that I was incarcerated into through my mind for like a decade, right? AA. So I feel like I'm just pointing the door to freedom, and the people who can't hear me, who come at me most aggressively, are the ones who have it so deep in their nervous system that this team freedom voice that I'm giving, in my view, right? Although I can be, I don't know, maybe some of my tone can be annoying, but still, the ones that see what I'm saying as a threat, it's because they so deeply hold the beliefs that they can never leave. And so part of me feels like I can't come at them hard, because it would be the same thing if I take my machine gun with somebody holding a stick and blow them away. I feel like it's just not fair, because I get them. I have the ability and the capacity, like you do, to have empathy for them because we were them. They do not have the ability or the capacity to have empathy for me. They don't understand my perspective, which is the left and deprogram perspective. So it makes me feel like it's not, even if I get triggered or dysregulated by a comment, especially the really bad ones, which I also I don't need anyone to see that either. If they're just really bad, you're gone. But I like to leave ones that don't agree with me, because I want lots of opinions. I want everyone's thoughts. But yeah, I really think of it. And then the mantra I use, because I have a mantra that I developed since I dissented. I didn't have this mantra before that, but here's another little trick that I do. When you have a dog, if you've ever had a dog or seen a dog in a movie or whatever, and if the dog grabs something that it's not supposed to, or it's going towards something it's not supposed to go towards, and you say, leave it, leave it, leave it, right? You ever heard someone say, leave it with a dog, to train it to not pick it up, to not go for it, or to not touch the person or whatever? So that's what I tell myself in my head. When I get dysregulated from a fucked up comment from a stepper on my YouTube channel, in my head, I'll go, leave it, because I want to, fight, freeze. I want to fight. So I literally go, leave it. That gives me the space. Literally, I don't know how that started, but I do leave it the same way I tell a dog or whatever, leave it. It gives me space. And then I remember, I'm not going to bring the machete to a stick fight. Like, that's fucked up. I'm not here to like get into a fight with somebody who's in prison who doesn't know that they can walk out. I'm here to let the people who realize that they can probably walk out, let them know they can walk out. So I've reframed it all for myself.
Yeah, I mean, I have kind of learned, like, because I don't want my own channel to just be a bunch of insults. Like, I'm not going to come, even when I get an ugly comment and I completely, totally lose my temper, yeah. I don't want to just come back with a bunch of insults. I never want to do that. I always, even in the old days when I would just snap and start typing, I wanted to put out a well-formulated approach to where other people reading this would say, this is why the person is wrong. But like you said, I have learned to walk away, and I look at this in the example of, and I pull out my old friends again, like the guys of the ancient Greek world who would have to get on a stage and they would have to passionately debunk this. And I say, okay, if I'm going to approach this, I'm going to approach it in that methodical way. I'm going to take this and I'm going to have a reasonable response. Unless it gets really insulting, then I will. I've been known for saying something like, I have ended my comments with it, and that's why I feel that way, you dipshit, when they do that to me. But right before I banned someone, before I said, well, goodbye, you dishonest jackass, I told them. But I do want to put out something where if someone was reading this, they would say, wait, I hadn't thought of that. Because, when you say something like, you're just a resentful, bitter person, if I had to type, fuck off, it wouldn't look good. But if I type, whether I'm resentful or not has nothing to do with whether I'm telling the truth or not, and then I give them a response, I think that carries more weight,
And it also, but it's also true, and it also gives anybody reading the comments something to think about. And it is making a point. When we're in cults, we have to distort the conversation so that we never address the actual point being raised if the point is involving critical thinking or about the cult.
So,
the contempt prior to investigation that they're all doing on our channels. Oh my God, this has been such a delight. I've had so much fun talking with you. This has been a long-awaited collab podcast. It's for months. I wanted to do this, so I'm glad to have this opportunity to have you on Sobriety Bestie podcast. I appreciate you so much.
Yeah, it has been great talking to you as well, because when I first got the invite from you, there was kind of a little bit of intimidation there. I'm like, this lady's a professional. She's got her act together, and I'm just some wise guy on the internet shouting into a camera. So I was like, but it's been a great conversation, because I feel like I love that perspective about believing before investigation. I mean, that's really so true. I mean, it's been a great couple of hours that we've talked up here. So.
Yeah, and I really, one of the things that stands out for me about what you said is that you realized, like, when you left AA, you realized that essentially that your perspective, how important your perspective was. So you realized that you could choose, that you were powerful, and you did. You realized that you could not, you create these new different shifts for yourself and these new things for yourself and go after what you wanted. You really took responsibility for the way that you were viewing yourself in life. Like, I feel like a lot of what I heard is AA really beat you down, and that your journey out has been building your self-esteem and yourself back up through critical thinking, through understanding like logical fallacies, through understanding reality and what AA is, but really taking responsibility for how you view yourself and knowing that how you actually see yourself is going to change everything. And you're just such a great example of, it doesn't matter where you're at now, you can change your perspective and start to change your life. And I'm delighted to like have had this conversation with you for real.
Well, it's really a lot of fun doing this. So.
Yeah, so thank you. So again, anybody who wants to come along and vibe with Quackaholics Anonymous, I will put, it's Quackaholics Anonymous is the YouTube channel, but I'll also put the link below. And everyone watching this, I hope you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did. I can't wait to hear from you. Probably we can't wait to hear from you in the comments below. So let us know what came up for you. What sparked? Did any insight come up for you? Did anything, what did you relate with? Let us know what you think in the comments. For me, I mean, I love doing these videos, and I know you get a lot out of doing them yourself, but it's also what I love almost even more is the conversation in the comments, because that's where it's like really a meeting of the minds. So I can't wait to read the comments. So hope to see you down below. Yeah.
I got a lot of people who hate me, so they're going to crawl out of the woodwork probably.
Well, you know what? I think there's probably even more people who love you if we're going to be really honest about the impact that you've had for, I don't know if it's been a decade or how many years you've been doing this, but you've been really making a big difference for a long time. And probably the biggest differences that you've made, you don't even know about because a lot of us don't say anything.
I hope so.
Yeah. So thank you. I appreciate you and see you in the comments below. Bye, guys. Bye, everybody.